Thanks all for making it online. For those of you that don't know me, Ben Nichols, our Executive Director for Fire Safe Sonoma. And those of you that might not know, Sonoma County, for those of you who might not know, Fire Safe Sonoma is our countywide fire safe council and has been serving Sonoma County since 1997. We live stream this program at 2 o'clock on the fourth Thursday of every month, except for the month of December. And you can find our past speaker series programs on our YouTube channel. We're in our sixth season, and so there's a lot of good information in our archives from prior presenters in months past. Before we get started today, I want to thank our partner today, CAL FIRE Battalion Chief Marshall Turbeville, for presenting this important information on the fire season outlook for 2026. Don't forget to check out the Fire Safe Sonoma calendar on our website for any upcoming events tied to Fire Safe Sonoma and our Firewise communities across the county. And you can subscribe for our updates so that you're in the loop on real-time updates for what's going on here in the county and across the state. Feel free to share any events you may be promoting with us to be able to put on our calendar to put out your event that's going on. And please let us know what you would like us to present in upcoming speaker series events so that we keep this material pertinent to educating you and your neighbors in our county for future wildfires. It's almost the end of Wildfire Preparedness Month as we come to the close of May. Hopefully you've been keeping up with our fire safety tips on Instagram and Facebook. And if you haven't had a chance yet, take a look and check those out. We also finished out the month here with going around the county to the different communities, doing coffee pop-ups with our CAL FIRE and fire service partners. Hopefully we got a chance to see you when we were out and about. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Turbeville to bring us up to speed on what fire season 2026 is currently looking like and what we can expect in months to come. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Good to be here with everybody today. I'm going to present the 2026 CAL FIRE Wildland Fire Season Outlook. And this will be a snapshot for today, May 28th. I'm going to provide links, or the staff here will provide links where you can keep current. Because anything I say now, conditions can change because weather changes. This photo here is the largest fire in Sonoma County this year, 9.7 acres. It was during the wind event last weekend, the weekend before last. Very easy to control. Took 6 firefighters, less than 1,000 gallons of water. And when you look at this, it's because the grass is green, not cured. And also there is eroded areas, so there's barriers, which could also be a road or a fuel break. So not all fires are bad. Not all fires burn the same. And that's some of the stuff I'm going to talk about today when we talk about the outlook or the potential. So kind of a different way of looking at this, and I'm going to present some different ways of thinking about stuff today, is if you look at time across the bottom from seconds, days to decades, and then area, square meters, kilometers, hundreds of kilometers. For a fire to ignite, for a fire to start, I think we all know we need the fire triangle. And the fire triangle in its 3 components exists only on Earth, no other planet. And many times it's because we don't have the fuel, the vegetation, and we don't have the ignition. So if everyone's being fire safe, we never have the heat, never have the ignition. So that's the fire triangle. How that fire burns in the wildland setting is based on the weather, topography, and fuel. Those are the 3 environmental elements. So much of today's talk is about weather, topography, and fuels. Topography, the lay of the land. Weather, predominantly the air temperature, wind, and how much water's in the air, called relative humidity. And then fuels, the vegetation, and there's both live and dead. But if we look at what is the trend over multiple years, over decades, that really is determining how our fires burn as far as severity and intensity, meaning how hot are they? How much do they affect the vegetation? And that is the general trend as I present today, will be that we are generally, in big terms, big areas, getting warmer and drier. And so that's what's happening on more of a climate basis. So from seconds to days to decades. And then this is just a a good way to think about fire behavior. So when a fire happens, you see smoke, you see a fire happening maybe on an app or a camera, how bad is it going to burn? Meaning, how fast is it going to burn? How big is it going to get? And these are some general concepts that warm air can hold more water than cold air. So during the hottest part of the day, the afternoon, water gets pulled out of the vegetation. So that means the vegetation now is more available to burn. Opposite happens at night. So the warmer it is, the more water leaves the soil, leaves the vegetation, and goes to the air, which then makes the vegetation a fuel and available to burn. And we talk about vegetation as live or dead. Generally, live vegetation is green, lush, has water, doesn't really burn well because it absorbs the heat or acts as a heat sink. Many of our grasses are annual grasses, so they are green in the spring and in the winter, but then they cure or dry out and turn to dead. And so dead vegetation or live fuels with low moisture, that's that part of the fire triangle that's going to make a fire ignite and then spread.
Need to do it.
So the air and the vegetation are always exchanging water. Really dry air, water comes out of the fuel, out of the vegetation. Really dry grass, the sun's heating the grass up right now, it dries out, and then it gets cold at night, and now the water leaves the air and goes into the grass. So it's a constant give and take over the day, season, and also at a climate scale. So the vegetation then acts as either a heat sink, absorbs the heat, or a heat source, meaning the solid is heated to convert to a gas, the gas mixes with air, the air then ignites. Same thing with an internal combustion engine. So much of our vegetation right now on a day like today, where we just had rain yesterday, is a heat sink. It can absorb the heat. It's not going to start a fire. And if a fire does start, it's not going to burn very fast or consume a lot of the fuel or vegetation. So fires on a foggy day early in the morning, these are also, good times to do your right thing at the right time of day, weed eating and mowing. They're not going to burn as a fire would late in the day when it's warm and dry, because the vegetation is now more of a heat source. Topographically, our south aspect, so moss grows on the north sides of trees, opposite as south aspect, those are our warmest and driest aspects because we're in the northern hemisphere, and that's where the sun, as the earth is tilted, those aspects are closest to the sun during our longest days of the year. How a fire spreads is called heat transfer. That's the transfer of heat, convection, conduction, and radiation. When you create defensible space, you're trying to break up heat transfer. Well, in fire behavior language, that's how a fire is going to spread. So if something burns, can it transfer that heat to something else? Vegetation. Wildfire, very simply, travels the opposite of water. Where water goes downhill, fire goes uphill. Wind, the most dominant driver. So very windy conditions, as we've experienced in 2017, 2019 locally, and afternoon fog winds, that's going to determine where a fire burns and how fast it burns, because that allows for better heat transfer. And when fuels or weather topography and fuels align, that's when we have our fires that are the hardest for firefighters to put out. So they burn the most amount of acres, or until enough firefighters can get there, they're going to be destructive. And so that's what we look for, is when these things come into alignment. It tends to be late summer and the fall, but it can also happen at other times of the year. What creates our winds is high and low pressures. That creates our general winds. These are large scale winds across multiple counties. So the recent cool period was caused by a low pressure. Our heat waves are caused by a high pressure. So we tend to have, in my experience, 2 weeks of a high pressure heat wave, and then that relaxes or lessens up. And then we get a cool down with onshore fog conditions, cooler conditions. But during a high pressure, that's when it stays warm, even at night, when it traditionally would stay or cool off at night. And then where these lows and highs are positioned, not just over California, but the western states, the Four Corners, that's what leads to our north winds, our east winds. Those are our locally destructive general winds. The more famous ones in Southern California are the Sundowners and the Santa Anas, but we're also now seeing places like Colorado that have the Chinook winds are the same principle. It doesn't have to be offshore. It's just flowing from a high pressure to a low pressure. So where those highs and lows are located, and every time it's a little bit different, that's even the El Nino, La Nina situation. That creates our wind events. and the severity of our wind events creates a potential for thunderstorms, which is not a common cause or common situation for us in Northern California, or common cause. Creates our heat waves, and it creates our cool periods. And then as the sun heats the earth and heats the earth through what's called radiation, the ocean heats up differently than the land. Aspects heat up differently than other aspects. Rocks heat up differently, or pavement heats up differently than trees. Grass heats up differently than brush. So that then creates our local winds, a wind that goes up a slope or comes off a lake. And that's our fog wind, or our onshore sea breeze. And that's our local wind. So that's a microclimate. And we have those Guala River drainage, Lower Russian River. We have windy areas. Those tend to be where we have windmills. We don't have commercial windmills in Sonoma County, but that's what drives and why windmills are installed, because there's wind. Just remember, a wildfire at a high intensity can create its own weather because hot air wants to rise. That's what's called the plume dominated fire. If we have a lot of fuel, a lot of vegetation, a lot of energy, intensity being released, that creates that plume dominated fire behavior. The other type of fire behavior is the wind-driven fire, and that is more likely our scenario of our large destructive fires, because there's not enough firefighters in the initial stages of a wind-driven fire to stop the spread. Plume-dominated doesn't burn as fast, but it produces a lot more heat, so we need a lot more water, and there's the potential that that fire will then create its own weather. So the other thing we talk about is there's no longer a fire season. It's a fire year, but that doesn't mean all 4 seasons of the year have the same fire behavior. So I'm just gonna profile each season real quickly. The winter, we can have fires in the winter, but it's shorter days, so we don't get as hot as temperatures. We don't get the drying of the vegetation, so it's more moist. But even this past year, we had periods without rain, or winter drought. There was a potential for a fire during the winter. And matter of fact, April, I'll show you some photos, in March, that's when we had escape burn piles, because we had a very dry period. Those fires didn't make the top 20 list. Maybe they made one of them did make the news, but they weren't destructive fires. We firefighters mobilized and we took care of them, just like that 9.7 fire I showed you in the opening slide. That was a winter fire. And then we have spring fires. Now we're starting to get longer days, so things are getting warmer, vegetation's starting to dry out, but the live vegetation, think about the grapevines right now, they're getting new growth. They're very moist. They are a heat sink, not a heat source. And so that's what's happening right now. We get unsettled weather, just like we had the rain yesterday, and cool conditions right now. And 2 weeks ago, we had a heat wave. So kind of this back and forth, unsettled weather leading into summer, which is now our longest days. And now the vegetation's going to dry, and we have a persistent fire season, a summer fire season. And then in the fall, the big question comes, and last year we did have rain before wind. Is it going to rain first, or is it going to be windy first? If we have rain first, which my perspective right now on today is that we are going to get an early rain event. That's what it's tending to be at a climate level. If we get an early rain event like we did in 2025, not like we did in 2017, where we had October 8th and it hadn't rained before then, substantially rained. That is the big question about the fall, because now we have dry vegetation. Yeah, we got shorter days, but we got dry vegetation and we got the wind. So that is the problem. That is our greatest risk for multiple fires, resisting firefighters' ability to contain them, is a fall wind-driven fire. So yes, there's a summer fire season, but we can have similar conditions during the other seasons. And I'm going to show you that through some graphs coming up. So just a recap of the end of summer 2025 leading into this year, 2026. Trivia, we had no red flag warnings last year in Sonoma County in 2025. Do I think that's going to hold true this year? I don't know. Remember, red flag warnings, we need cured grass, no rain, our fine dip fuel moistures, which is our 1/4 inch fuels. Think about a large dowel. It's got to be less than 6%. And a combination of how dry the air is with wind for 8 hours, that's what leads to our red flag warning. And I'll show you, we statistically have never had a red flag warning between the months of January, February, March, and April, because we have green grass and our twigs, or those wood dowels, are not dried out. We did have heat. we did have hot days. Hot days by themselves don't cause fires. Hot days don't lead to red flag warnings. I expect we will have record heat days, hot days in our county, in Sonoma County. But that alone doesn't mean we're going to have a catastrophic or a disastrous fire. It will mean the vegetation will get dried out. But how long is the heat wave? Is there now then a low pressure or weather that then allows the vegetation to gain moisture? So there will be hot days. There could very well be lightning. And remember, locally, lightning is not a big cause of fires. 2020 being a anomaly, 2008 another anomaly north of us in Mendocino County, and we had lightning last year, not locally at scale or quantity, but you didn't hear about these fires in August of 2025 being like the fires of August of 2020, where we had the Million Acre Fire, the largest fire in recorded history. And so ignitions by themselves, remember, don't drive bad fires, catastrophic fires. And so this just shows last year we did have lightning, but this is the big thing in the fall. We had, it wasn't, inches of rain, but we had that unsettled low pressure September rain event that took away, and this is late September graphic here, that took away some of that potential. So if you were on a north aspect, the bottom of a drainage where you get very little sunlight in the fall because the days are getting shorter, it really allowed that vegetation to become less available to combust, to burn, to become a resistance to control for firefighters. I think we're going to get this type of scenario this year again, looking at some of the long-term weather forecasts. But remember, climate-wise, and these graphs show that we are getting warmer and we are getting drier. The coloring here on the left shows we are getting warmer statistically. The graph here on the right, we're in the white there. Sonoma County, if you can see my cursor, see if I can get it to show. This county right here, we are, near normal. Okay. But generally, we are getting warmer and drier on a year-to-year decade basis. So this is one of the websites I monitor. It's Dr. Daniel Swain. It's weatherwest.com. This is where just in the last couple of days, reading up on some of his El Nino La Nina discussion. That's why I think we're going to get a fall rain event before we get a wind event. This is a great site to look at and to monitor and get a bunch of insight. And if you're very interested in El Nino La Nina potential, which is being talked about, it'll be a very strong one coming up this year. He has some great videos for you guys to watch. But I put winter in quotes here. Winter, our new winter is December to the end of February. So even though we might get that rain event in September, and I'm hopeful we will, there's still, we have a very short winter now. So we're getting into spring earlier. We're having earlier start to the summer fire season. And this is what's happening now with a climate situation, a climate scale. So this is, leading up into the spring and summer of 2026. We had a weed eater mowing caused fire in April. Not unheard of, but this is a symbolic, representation of the fuels are drying out. And now we're, I think, much more aware of ignitions because we have the camera system, we have apps, but this is a fire that starts in April. It'll be a lot different fire if it would have started in May or June. This did have the CAL FIRE helicopter respond to it. Here's some other statistics now, just talking statistics, going away from summer 2025 going down to 2026. But here's what the stats show. I'm going to show you this slide and another slide about stats. So if you just look at the fall, the most destructive fires tend to be in the coastal counties, Sonoma County being a coastal county. That tends to be where people are at. So destructive fire defined, structures burned. Not the largest, but destructive. So where there's homes, where there's people, those are where our destructive fires happen. So we shouldn't think that a coastal county is safe from this. Our largest fires in the fall tend to be in Southern California. I think we're probably aware of this, the wind-driven brush fires, but those are our largest fires, which some of those could also be destructive. So that's what the statistics show about fall fires. But if you look at the three lists that CAL FIRE maintains, CAL FIRE has the 20 largest fires, that's acreage. The 20 most destructive fires, that's structures that get burned by the wildfire. And the 20 deadliest fires. Unfortunately, that means people were killed by the wildfire. And that's what's being shown here in the three columns. Largest fires, most destructive fires, and deadliest fires. On this column here is for the top 20 ignitions. If you look at the ignitions, our largest fires are lightning caused. Our most destructive fires are caused by power lines or electrical. Our deadliest fires are split. They're either human related, which makes sense. Most fires are human related, and people are going to be unfortunately killed by a wildfire. People are probably going to be in that area. So 5 are human related, 5 are other. So this is someone, pulling off in dry grass, losing a tire and riding on their rim, accidentally, not intentionally. Those are our deadliest, most destructive. The number one on these lists, the biggest fire, was the lightning caused multiple fires that merged together called the August Complex. That was north of us. The most destructive is the Camp Fire, November 8, 2018, Butte County, Paradise. Number 2 there is 2017 Tubbs Fire in Sonoma County. So 1 year later, the most destructive fire was in Butte County, and that stands to date as the most destructive fire. The deadliest, unfortunately, is also the Camp Fire in Butte County. So normally, November, Paradise, Butte County should have had rain, possibly maybe snow. They didn't in that year because they didn't have that rain or snow event before the wind event. And so that is that setup when those 3 ingredients come together to create the greatest potential for a most destructive, deadliest, even a largest fire. And then in the bottom half of this chart is the months of the year. So when does our largest fires happen? Yeah, we know they're lightning caused, but they tend to start in August. So August, July, that's our tropical moisture. That's our lightning potential. Remember, this is California, not just Sonoma County. They tend to start remote. Maybe they're managed versus suppressed, where we use indirect tactics where we fall back to a road versus putting firefighters right on the edge of the fire. The most destructive, yes, power lines are electrical caused, but they tend to be in October. So that's the recipe for Sonoma County disastrous destructive fire. And then notice deadly, also the same, October. So a wind-driven fire, not a plume-dominated fire. Okay, so wind with structures, fall type fire scenario. And then because of the Palisades and Eaton fire in January of 2025, just this last year, I needed to add a January row. Everything else was June through December up until we had Palisades and the Eaton fire. And so now there's 2 fires that are in the top 20 that are wintertime fires. I don't know if you guys were paying attention to this past January of 2026. Similar winds happened in Southern California. No red flag warning. Also no fire. And that was because Southern California had that rain before wind last fall. In fall of 2025 fall of 2024 going in January 25, they did not have that. So we really need to pay attention in the fall. Is it going to rain first, or is it going to be windy first? So there is potential varies during the time of the day. So normally the afternoon could be 3 to 5 p.m. is roughly, I'd say the peak of our, most ignitions when fires start that we have to mobilize a lot of firefighters for. So that's definitely not a time to be weed eating or mowing on a warm, dry afternoon. And that's because we have the sun it comes up year round, and it heats up the air. Well, it heats up the ground. The air in contact with the ground heats up and rises. And then it eventually pulls. Remember, warm air can hold more water than cold air. It pulls water out of the vegetation, out of the soil. That's what leads to instability, leads to wind. And that's what the sun does. The sun, if we didn't have the sun, this would be totally, we wouldn't be talking about this. And then at night, as the sun goes down, the reverse happens. So the greatest potential is when it's hotter and drier during the day, specifically the afternoon. The longer the day, the longer the afternoon. So on a warm, dry, high pressure day where it's warm overnight, it could be as early as 6 a.m., 8 a.m. A fire could happen that needs firefighters. It's hard to control. So on a warm, dry day, that's not a good day to go weed eat at 8 a.m. in the morning. Now the whole day has a fire potential problem. Different seasons have different daytime durations. So that's why in the wintertime, we don't have the same amount of heat we have in the summer. So there's some differences there by seasons. And then multiple years, decades, climate's changing this. So we used to have a saying, or we still have a saying, that firefighters own the night, fire owns the day, meaning firefighters are more effective at night. But that's not going to be true if it stays warm and dry at night. And we do have a situation called the nocturnal drying event here, where it's very dry above our fog layer in the summer and fall. And that's going to create a problem for us if we don't get non-daytime burn conditions or cooler moisture conditions where the fire slows down, doesn't create embers that start spot fires, and then we can be more effective. So that is what's happened at a climate scale. So graphically, if you guys want to see this, this is from a weather station where the blue line represents the solar radiation or incoming radiation from the sun. And you can see that's like a nice heartbeat, if you will. This is from last week. The sun comes up, the blue line goes up, the red vertical line shows noon solar, or noon time on a clock, not solar noon. But that's what happens every day. So when that solar radiation, which is about 1,000 this time of year, it's going to be higher when we get later in the summer, and it'll be less in the winter. That's what's drying our vegetation out. So that is our greatest, if you want to statistically talk, that's our greatest potential for that ignition to occur from a fire triangle point of view, and also from a fire behavior triangle point of view. This is what the temperature does. This is what the RH does, the green line. Temperature's blue line. Don't worry about the black line. But that's what happens. Temperature goes up during the day because the sun comes up. Temperature goes down at night when the sun goes down. And that's climate is changing that, climate change. And then remember, warm air can hold more water than cold air. So our relative humidity, which is a measure of water in the air, it fluctuates similarly. Highest relative humidity when the sun's down, lowest relative humidity late in the day. And then this doesn't have fuel moisture on this graph, but the next graph will. And this one's harder to see because we only get hour reading, so it's very blocky if linear lines. But when relative humidity goes down, that means there's less water in the air. Water then gets pulled out of the vegetation, both live and dead. This graph here is just dead fuels. So when it's dry for multiple days, dry air for multiple days, a high pressure, the vegetation dries out. The vegetation gets cured. Maybe we feel our lips get chapped, or we got to water our plants more. That means the air is sucking or pulling or reaching equilibrium scientifically, but pulling water out of the vegetation, out of the ground. So we have metrics. Firefighter use these metrics to talk about fire potential, both for how many firefighters we're going to send to a fire. Could a fire create a spot fire? And there's 4 of them. The first one is ignition component. And this is a number between 0 and 100, meaning if an ember lands in a receptive fuel bed, receptive vegetation, will it cause a fire? Will the fire triangle occur? So on a very dry day where an ember can stay burning in the dry air and it lands on dry vegetation, we have a very high ignition component. So if an ember comes out of a tree like a leaf or a needle, lands in dry grass, ignition component's 80. That means 80 of those leaves or needles out of 100 would create a fire. We have very low ignition potential right now, which is why we're not getting a lot of fire starts. We're not getting wildfire ignitions. People are still doing burn piles. People are weed eating right now. People are mowing, probably not using the right mower, and hitting rocks. Things like that are happening. People are having campfires. People are pulling off in grass. People are losing tires or dragging chains. There's lightning happening. But the ignition component is very low. So theoretically, the closer we are to 0, a wildfire will not happen. Cannot happen. And then during a wildfire, if we know the IC is 0, we know we don't have a potential for spot fires. So if we're doing a prescribed burn, we want to look at this type of index. And then just as a reminder, not just Sonoma County, but the national trend is most fires, 95% or greater, are caused by human. In this local CAL FIRE unit called Sonoma Lake Napa, Sonoma County being one of the 6 counties in the Sonoma Lake Napa unit, this is statistically over the last several years what causes fires. So just as a reminder, the natural cause, that's lightning. It is not a common cause. 2020, yes, we did have lightning caused fires. People throwing cigarettes out their window from a moving vehicle, not a common cause. It can It can occur. It's not common. It's actually harder than you think to have a cigarette cause a fire under that situation. But you notice it's others, it's undetermined, which means we can't conclusively rule out all causes or determine one exact cause. But look, equipment is 17%. My opinion, not all of those absolutely were not destructive, not large. They might have burned a 10-foot by 10-foot area, but those are the preventable fires. And then arson, that means someone intentionally ignited a fire. And that's only gonna, we're only gonna be able to fix that through better prevention, education. But arson caused fires is a cause across the 6 units of Sonoma Lake Napa. So the next indice is spread component. And this doesn't go 0 to 100. This is 0 to unlimited. It's a measurement of how fast a fire will burn at the head of the fire. The head of the fire is the fastest moving part of the fire. So this is the part of the fire that's spreading opposite of water. It's burning up that slope. It's spreading with the wind. So this is the fastest moving part of the fire. It's measured in feet per minute. And it varies from 10 a.m. in the morning, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. It's a diurnal thing. So we know when we have a high spread component, that fire is going to move very fast. If we have a spread component of 300, that means 300 feet per minute. That is going to be very hard for a firefighter to use a hand tool to cut hand line, to spray water. We're going to need aircraft to slow the fire down using retardant, extinguish the fire if they have water, to buy us time to get there. And if we have a spread component that's 300 feet per minute, 24 hours a day, we are not going to be effective. That means there's a 24-hour all day long burn period versus just a daytime burn period. So the lower the spread component, which we have very low spread component right now because the vegetation's not dry, we are more effective. A measurement of how much heat or energy is being released is the burning index. And this is what we use locally to determine, CAL FIRE uses to determine how many firefighters to send to a fire, how many airplanes are going to go, how many helicopters, how many bulldozers, how many hand crews. This is what CAL FIRE uses. It's not a 0 to 100, it's 0 to open-ended. So fuels, weather, topography. The drier the fuels, the warmer the air, the windier it is, the higher burn index we're going to have, the higher BI. So the lower the BI, we're more effective. Higher BI, less effective. So think about this. Ignition component, will a fire start? Spread component, how fast will that fire burn? Burning index, how much resistance, how much energy is going to be released? How much work is it going to take? How much water is it going to take? And then the last indice, this is the one I like to use. We don't use it for day-to-day dispatch levels, but this shows the trend, and this is the graph I'm going to show you a lot here coming up to talk about potential, is the energy release component. That is how much heat is going to be released per square foot of the fire. So if you have a fireplace, maybe you're cooking, campfire, if you burn grass, it burns very quickly and there's not sustained heat. But if you burn a log, it's going to burn slowly, and so there's going to be sustained heat. So ERC, a very high ERC, is going to represent drought conditions. How dry are those logs out there in the forest? How dry are those limbs that fell off a tree 3 years ago? How dry is it that tree that fell last winter? That is our ERC. Grass only produces so much heat. It's our bigger fuels, our logs, that produce the heat. And our fancy word for that firefighter term is our 1,000-hour fuels, the logs that are greater than 3 inches in diameter. This is not a 0 to 100 like the ignition component. This is also open-ended. And good or bad, I think this is good. The wind does not influence the ERC. The ERC is more a measurement of how much heat, how much energy, how much water. So as a recap, ignition component, will a fire start? Spread component, how fast will it burn? BI, it tells us how big their flames are going to be too, but gives us an indication of resistance to control. And then ERC is how much heat is going to be released, which is also resistance to control. So spread component, wind-driven fire, ERC, plume-dominated fire behavior, fire creating its own weather. So the higher the ERC, that's when I start getting concerned about, okay, this fire is going to take a lot of firefighters. And I'll just give you a little glimpse of the last couple slides when I talk about the summary. This is one of my concerns for this year is our forests are drier than they should be for this time of year because of how our rains happened this past winter. So we are going to set records for ERC. My prediction set records for ERC this summer. And if you listened to me last year, I said the same thing. We are setting new records every year. Yeah, we're setting new air temperature records, a day here, a day there. But on a general trend, we are setting new ERC records every year, which is demonstrating that our forests, our wildlands are burning differently now. So that's that climate where we talk about severity, intensity. Our forests are burning different. And I'm going to give you an analogy here in a minute. So to put it all together, you guys see the IC spread or initial component, spread component, SC, BI/percentile, burn index, energy release component, ERC. And this is what CAL FIRE uses for sending firefighters, how many firefighters to send. That's in the middle of the screen there called the LNU standard response. We have a low dispatch, which would just be 2 fire trucks and 1 battalion chief, myself, possibly going. A medium dispatch would be 4 engine, 2 hand crews, 2 bulldozers, 1 helicopter, 1 air attack. You guys might call that the spotter plane. 2 air tankers. So that's everything out at Sonoma County Airport. 1 air attack, 2 air tankers, and a battalion chief. A high dispatch would be 6 CAL FIRE engines. And remember, city fire departments, local fire districts are going to send more on top of what CAL FIRE is sending because many times they're closer. 2 hand crews, 2 bulldozers, CAL FIRE helicopter, and what's called an exclusive use helicopter. So CAL FIRE hires private non-fire department helicopters every year to augment what CAL FIRE has. One of those will be at Sonoma County Airport this year. So there'll be 2 helicopters coming on a high dispatch, 1 air attack, 3 air tankers. So now we're calling down Ukiah or another air base in, and a battalion chief. So that's how we recognize potential as far as how many firefighters we send. So this was 10 o'clock on May 20th last week. It was at the end of that heat wave, which did not result in a red flag warning because our vegetation wasn't cured, but we definitely had the winds. And that we would have sent this amount of resources in the coastal area. And so the coastal area is essentially, if you want to think about it, Annapolis west down into Guerneville area, and then over to Fulton and down the 101, a little bit of the Sonoma Valley. And then the Petaluma area is all coastal, and that's modeled as a timber type vegetation. And then Mayacamas is the rest of Sonoma County. That's modeled as a brush. So coastal is represented by the Santa Rosa weather station up on Fountain Grove. And the Mayacamas is represented or modeled by a weather station at 2,000 feet up near the geysers called Hawkeye. So this is what we look at. We get this updated every 2 hours. It's coming in right now. That was one of the pings you heard on my phone. So this varies every 2 hours for CAL FIRE. Most of the time we are in a low dispatch, so there's low fire potential. The rains yesterday, we were in a low dispatch. We'll probably be in a low dispatch for a couple of days now because the rain put water in the ground, put water in the logs that are laying on the ground, and it's going to keep the green or live vegetation green for a little bit longer. So daily, now seasonal. And remember, we have 4 seasons. That's created by how the sun goes around the earth goes around the sun. And then the northern hemisphere now is tilted towards the sun. So we get longer days and we get hotter days. So that's what creates our seasonal conditions. We are also in that Mediterranean climate. So between 30 and 45 degrees north. It also happens in the south latitude. That would just be the southern hemisphere. That's when they have the fire season in our winter, which is their summer. Kind of weird way of saying it. But we're in the right latitude near the equator to have all of our rain, most of our rain happen in the winter months and very little rain in our summer months. But I'm hoping we get some rain in our late summer, early fall. So what that creates is this daytime, nighttime weather conditions. So firefighters own the night, fire owns the day. And this transition that our vegetation goes from being a heat sink to a heat source. It dries out on a seasonal basis. It goes dormant. It goes to seed. It changes, just like the grapevines every year grow back. The roots are always there, but the leaves grow back every year. Deciduous trees, conifer trees, all these things that happen on a seasonal basis. If we were in the tropics, it would be different. The plants would be different. the fire season, the fire potential would be different, or the summer fire season would be different. So I spend a lot of time explaining even to firefighters about heat sink versus heat source. This is why, if you burn a pile in the middle of winter that's not cured, it doesn't burn very well. But if you let that limb sit there and cure out, it burns differently. Or maybe you have a Christmas tree you bring in when it's nice and green, and you take it out of your house 2 weeks later and it's not as green, it's dull, or maybe it's losing needles and everything else. Okay, well, your tree there went from a heat sink to a heat source. The plant you cut or cord of wood you cut to use in your campfire, your fireplace, really heavy to lift. It has a lot of water in it. It's a heat sink. That water's got to be driven off by the heat of the fire. Once it dries, it becomes a heat source. So that's this thing that occurs on a daily and seasonal basis. Dead fuels versus live fuels. Live fuels we care about, or the species of concern we care about the most or monitor the most is chamise. And this is our trend line here in Sonoma County, a site up near Geyser Peak, where this is many years of data, over 20 years. When we say that our live fuel moisture chamise gets below 100%, it is now changing from a heat sink to a heat source. And when it gets below 60% in this red zone down here, it is really now going to contribute to the fire problem, add resistance to control. So now a higher burn index, a higher energy release component. And then these are the trend lines. Solid blue is the current year. So you can see when we look at the dash line of the average conditions versus the minimum ever recorded, we didn't peak out here, so we didn't get as much water on board. It's drying out, or never reached the same peak as the average, and it's drying out now. So there's a potential we could have our brush reach 60%, reach 100%, already has, reach 60% sooner in the year. So this is a concern for our summer now. We might have summer brush conditions or fall brush conditions in our summer. And last week, the brush fires in Southern California is a different fire regime, but that is an indicator that potentially our brush is changing or will change sooner from a heat sink to a heat source. I'm going to go through this stuff kind of quickly, but this is Climate Prediction Center information. Seasonal stuff relating to climate should be no surprise. Red means above average temperature. I'll take it all the way through next year. Predicted to be above average temperatures for the next 10 months. Okay, should be no surprise. This is a site you guys can monitor. This was published May 21st. There'll be a new one out about every 1 to 2 weeks. And then if you look at our precipitation, white means neutral chances, green means above. We basically have neutral chances on precipitation. So just our average conditions. So if we do have a little bit of rain in the summer, fall, that would be considered average. So I guess if you're looking for good news here that we're going to get a bunch of rain and not have a summer fire season, that's not what these predictions are saying. We're going to trend above average on temperature and about average on precipitation. And what we're noticing is we're getting weather whiplash, to quote Dr. Daniel Swain, where it rains a lot, then it's dry a lot. And so that's not a good thing for the vegetation, because we need duration of rain events. We need exposure for the big logs to gain water. And so there is potential, if you look at Climate Prediction Center, to the north of us, Mendocino County, they will enter into a drought development likely. Here's just California, Sonoma County here shown in black. This link down here, which I believe is also in chat, will take you to this. This also is updated about once a week. We don't look to be going into drought. That's good news. But to the north of us, there is that potential. So I do have some concern for the forest to the north of us, because remember, everything's trending warmer, even if we get average precipitation. And then just a recap on climate, long-term, multi-year, average temp RH, relative humidity is water in the air, rainfall, wind, solar radiation, or frequency of extreme weather. So this is what's changing, whether it's human cause, natural cause, whether in some type of natural cycle. I would say that's, being looked at, but that is having an effect on our fire behavior. So this is how a firefighter might describe it. If you put 5 gallons of gasoline in your garage every year, and that gasoline never gets used, never gets burned, and then you add 5 more gallons of gas the next year, and you keep just loading, storing gas in your garage, at some point, if your garage does catch fire, it's going to be a much worse scenario than if you would have just used that gas up every year. So this is a firefighter's way out of a firefighter publication. Gas is fuel, vegetation is fuel. That if you don't manage your fuel, because we can't really manage the weather, we can't manage topography. If you manage your fuel, manage your vegetation, don't let it get to a point that we're going to have an ERC that is non-natural, non-historical. Granted, everything's trending upward. A non-natural, non-historical BI. That is what's leading to more of our acres burning, high severity, high intensity, because we're firefighters can't put out a fire that's burning with that level of ERC or BI. So I'm going to finish up showing you guys some graphs. This link is also in chat. This is all publicly available data. And the red arrow there shows 80 percentile. So 80 percentile would mean only 20% of the year would the values be greater, or 20% of the year would the values be lower. So when we look at the ERC graph, remember, this is my favorite indice to look at because this is long-term trends, not hourly trends. The red, and this is over the last 17 years, the red line is the historical highest ever extreme value ever recorded on that day, not all in the same calendar year. The gray line is the average, so all the years averaged together. The blue line is our current year, and the green line is the prediction for the next several days. And then in the background, you see the color code, green, which means this is the 0 to 60th percentile. So 60% of the time we're in the green. This is our 60 to 80th percentile, the lighter green. This is our 80th percentile, which has a value of 49.57 right here. And it just shows you, what's the chances we're going to have these conditions, or what are these conditions like compared to other years? And so you guys can see that right here back in March and April of this year, we exceeded the red line. So we were at record-setting extreme values. Now, no bad fires happen, no big acreage fires happen, no destructive fires happen. Yeah, I told you guys a weed eater fire happened in Fountain Grove. We had burn pile escapes happen, but nothing bad happened because we didn't have like a plume-dominated, wind-driven scenario. So that is an event fire season potential in the winter. So average, extreme, highest ever recorded, current year. So we just had a little rain event. We dip down. It's going to warm up. We're going to respond right back. So my opinion, my outlook is you're going to see up and down, little jumping up and down of the ERC, but it's going to, unless we get a multiple day, low pressure, cold event, rain, we're going to stay above average and probably be setting ERC values. And that is because our big fuels, the big dead logs, our 1,000-hour fields, I'll show you the graph, they did not have an opportunity to gain water during this past winter. So if you want to look at it this way, when the blue went up for this current year, that was our winter drought period, our 4 to 6 week of dry weather. We had a little rain event here, dropped it down. Big rain event here, meaning multiple day, multiple inches, dropped it down. Then we had a heat wave. This is when everyone was thinking, oh, we're going to start summer. And then this is where we set the records. This is when we had burn piles get out of control. Weed eater fire in Fountain Grove. Then we had a little rain, more rain, dropped it down. We had the wind event a couple weeks ago. Power lines fell. Unfortunately, someone was killed in Santa Rosa. Someone was seriously injured in Calistoga, or Santa Rosa, sorry, during that wind. Similar wind, I would say, my opinion, as the 2017 Tubbs fire, but it was a spring wind, not a summer fall wind. That brought us right back to extreme values. Then we just had the rain event, low pressure, and we're then going to predict it to respond right back up. So if you want to think about it this way, high pressure comes in, that blue line goes up. Low pressure, cooler, fog conditions, that blue line drops. So if you're timing when to maintain your grass, when to weed eat, when to do outside activities, time it for the cool days. Don't go work on the warm, dry days. And even the one day after the high pressure, the vegetation still has not absorbed water from the air. That's some of our worst fires because when it's hot, people don't go outside. I'm talking trends in my observations, and then it cools off, and then they do go outside to do things, and it's cooler, but the vegetation, especially the logs and the grass, have not gained the water back. So if you want to keep it simple, high pressure equals heat wave, means increased ERC, means Don't do the right thing at the wrong time of the day. Low pressure, cool conditions like we're having now, fog and cool, decreased ERC, good time to take advantage to get your vegetation defensible space done. So this was during that peak in March. I took a snapshot here showing you, and this is what I sent out to some CAL FIRE folks saying, hey, we are having conditions that we would normally see in late June, which is our gray historical average line. We're having those same conditions right now in mid-March. So that's why we talk about earlier summer fire season, because we are getting ERCs now, sometimes in the winter, the non-summer fire season. That's why we have the year-round fire season. That's kind of getting based on climate, kind of getting scary, that we have the potential for summer-like fire behavior, not in the summer. So that's what we're looking at right now. Same graph. If you wanted to look at the BI, remember the BI is another indice. This is a lot more erratic or responsive. It goes up and down a lot more. This is what we use for dispatch levels, how much we send to firefighters. Same type of thing. It's going to stay between all summer long. It'll be much more up and down erratic. It's going to stay between average and extreme values. That's what we're setting up going into the summer fire season. This is one of the reasons our big logs, firefighter term, 1,000-hour dead fuel moisture, greater than 3 inches in diameter. This graph is now inverse. So the lower value means it's drier. So the red line, lowest ever for the past 17 years. Gray line, 17 years of average data. Blue line this current year. So when the blue line goes down, fuels are dry. That's when our ERC and BI went up. When our ERC goes down because the water in the dead fuels rose here, that's when we have low BI, low ERC. So you can see that we are going to trend back down. We just hit average and we're trending now back towards extreme. We get a multi-day heat wave. And remember, our days are only going to get longer now until October 21st. We are going to see that blue line or that green line always, unless there's a low pressure, cool days, trending down, staying near extreme conditions. So same graph in the back here, same red line, gray line, ERC values again, pointing to the 80th percentile. So the green vertical lines are 80th percentile. This would be our summer fire season. So when I started with CAL FIRE CDF in the mid-90s, we would get hired July 1st, maybe June. It was crazy if you got hired mid-April. And you would stay on until third week of September, October 1st. It was a 10 or 12 week summer fire job, seasonal job. So that is our historical average, though the average is changing with climate, when we are above 80%. So that would be roughly July 1st to second or third week of June, even based on the last 17 years. So this is our event. So this is an event. This is an event. We just had an event. No fires happened. No significant fires happened. We have more of an event, a wind event type scenario in our non-summer fire season. This is the big scary part right here. Is it going to rain first or is it going to be windy first? Because if it doesn't rain first, that blue and green line is going to be up here setting record level red lines. So that is our fall fire season potential. But I am hopeful, looking at outlooks, we will get the September rain. And then just that trivia I mentioned before, we've never, that I know of in my life, in the recorded stuff I can look at, had a red flag warning between January 1st and roughly the third week of May. And even having it in May is very rare. That would be a drought year. Our red flags normally don't happen until second or third week of June. So we had a lot of winds a week and a half ago. We didn't have a red flag. So that is historical data, the seasonal perspective. I'm going to go through this quickly so I can wrap up by 3 o'clock. There is tools out there available to you publicly. This is what firefighters use. This is produced every couple days. It's the whiff tick. The website's at the bottom. There's also the 7-day potential. Yellows and greens. Greens means moist. So we're in the NC02. We're in a very moist period right now. So very low fire potential. But we will start drying out because it's going to get warmer. You saw that in the ERC graph. It'll turn to yellow, eventually brown. And then on the high risk days, lightning, wind events, it'll be red. Here's the four-month outlook. So May, June, July, August, you can see Sonoma County here. We are predicted to be above normal for June. Half of Sonoma County in July, same half of Sonoma County in August. Before that rain event in early April, we were also predicted to be above normal in May. So that's what the outlook looks like. Zoomed in, if you will. This is also available at that WIFTIC website. This gets released on the 1st of every month, so there'll be a new update coming out next Monday. But this is what the firefighters use for the outlook. And so in closing, the last couple slides here, California's Mediterranean climate, we are going to have wildfires. Are they all going to be bad? Statistically, no. But that potential varies daily and seasonally. That's what I tried to explain today. The intensity or the behavior is those three environmental factors: weather, topography, and fuels. Less fuels available to burn, whether you've managed them or they're green and not available to burn because of rain, that reduces that intensity. Firefighters are least efficient or successful when containing high intensity fires. So when there's a high BI, a high ERC, we need more firefighters. We need more water. We probably can't work right up on the fire because there's so much heat. We got to fall back. We rely on aircraft bulldozers. We also need more firefighters when they're fast moving. And that could be the first couple hours, just we can't get there quick enough. Or it could be a 10 to 12 hour wind event, Kincaid fire style, Tubbs fire, where we just can't catch up with the fire. The spread component is too high. But not all those fires necessarily burn at high intensity. When we talk about multiple fires at a time, like the 2020 lightning siege, the Walbridge fire mainly got big because there was many other fires in our county as well as the neighboring counties. So there wasn't enough firefighters to go around. But not all the Walbridge burned high intensity, high severity. That was more a factor that there was just too many fires. Remember, lightning is not a common cause. Mid-June, and this rain event may have just changed my opinion, but I'm sticking with mid-June. I'll watch how the graphs go, but you guys can monitor the graphs as well. Mid-June, maybe third week of June, that'll be the start of the summer fire season, which normally would be July 1st on a historical basis. Daytime conditions now going into nighttime with climate, so longer burn window, longer daytime conditions going into night. Fall, will we have the wind first or will we have the rain? I'm hopeful we will have the wind. The rain. We will get normally the 2 weeks of cold air, cool conditions, 2 weeks of hot. That's the highs and lows. And then remember, El Nino presents the potential for changing ocean temperatures. That changes how much the fog comes in, how much difference is between how the land heats versus the water heats. And then last two slides, I'll break it down this way. Grass fires, brush fires, and timber fires or forest fires. Remember, grass cures every year. It's going to cure again. It's been delayed a little bit, but it will cure. I recommend you get out there, mow, weed eat, do your grass management. I would much rather have a grass fire than a brush or timber fire. Less embers, less heat. Stays on the surface of the earth. But grass fires do move fast. Brush fires, more about the heat sink, heat source. Remember looking at chemise. So curing may be happening sooner this year than in past years, but that's something to watch out for. We're also not having brush fires right now, but later in the summer going into fall, in our eastern part of our county, we have more brush. Watch as those brush fires happen. That's telling you as an indicator that the potential's picking up. Hopefully we get that rain before wind to take that possibility away. But my last slide, I'll end it with this. My biggest concern, as with 2025, is our forest fires. A lot of fuel loading, a lot of tons per acre out there. Did not get the rain exposure. It's dry. We're seeing that in the ERCs. And then there's always the potential in your community, in your neighborhood. It could be a small fire where fire starts, burns uphill quickly, burns with the wind, quicker than we can get there. The fires, threatening homes, threatening your evacuation route. And that's a bad fire for somebody. It's not going to make statistics, may not be the biggest acreage. Hopefully it's not destructive. Hopefully it's not deadliest, but that potential exists. So fires start from people normally. Think about where most people are at. You saw the statistics. When the three environmental elements come together, fuels, weather, topography, That's when we have the fire triangle leading to fire behavior, leading to resistance to control. So thank you. Prove me wrong. Don't start. Let's not have any fires this year. Keep up on the statistics as well. Look at the data. You guys can predict this stuff just like I can. I just have a little bit more experience, but all this stuff's out there for you guys to do your own research. Pay attention. Fire Safe Sonoma, CAL FIRE, we all want you guys to be a well-informed community because we want you to make decisions when we're not available for us to for you to call us. So that's why I value today's presentation, community meetings. Let's answer those questions. Let's understand this stuff because once a fire starts, I'm going to be very busy. I'm not going to be as friendly. I'll apologize for that now because we got a job to do and we're trying to basically stop a fire. So thank you guys again. I'll turn it back over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Marshall. Once again, a very informative session and great information for the crowd that was able to make it online today. A couple questions that were in the chat that came up during the presentation. First was a question from Kevin about is landscaping equipment becoming more safe as we switch from gas powered to battery powered?
And I'll answer that. I'm not going to give you like a yes or no answer. There's, from my experience, three ways equipment causes fire. One can be when you're fueling it. So obviously, if we're going to battery powered, there's less fueling. And that includes when you set it down in dry grass. So we just got to make sure if it's a hot battery or the rotating head is hot, that still, even though it's a battery, still could cause a fire. The other option is, I'm hoping everyone's using string, but if you're using a metal blade and you hit something solid, it doesn't matter how the thing's powered, that's going to create a spark. And then as you're working, if the grass builds up in a friction point or chafe, that's going to potentially cause a fire as well. So yeah, I'm hopeful that batteries will reduce the fueling caused fires, but the potential still exists. There is always a potential. Even on a rainy day, there's always potential. So simple answer, I guess, would be yes, but remember, they still can cause fires. Don't let your guard down.
And to Marshall's point, your typical residential or even commercial mower is designed to mow irrigated lawns in a neighborhood. They were not designed to cut dry annual grass. So every time you do that, it should be as early in the morning as possible, and just all the points that Marshall hit about making sure it's not dry or windy, and you have tools immediately handy to extinguish any fire that may start with a rock strike with that blade of the mower. And our other question was from Dorothy asking how much does groundwater level play into the situation? Is there any measurement of this?
Yeah, there is measurements of groundwater, and more specifically, there's two types of groundwater. There's surface water, not runoff water, and then there's water at more depth. So for the live vegetation, think about trees. They're pulling water from depth normally. Redwoods also have the unique ability to pull water from the air. Fog drip helps us. So it's two part. So the live plants and trees that have roots are perennials, and that's not necessarily annual grasses. They can get water from depth. And that's what's good about a long duration rain event is it allows water to soak in. Soil or water at the surface level, that's more important for our dead fuels that lay on the ground. So once the ground dries out, now those logs that are laying on the ground are not getting water from the soil, and so that's a different piece. So it's live versus dead fuels, depth of the water in the soil, it all comes into play. Just like the battery question about the weed eater, it's a variable answer. Ideally, we want wet soil at the surface and also at depth, both for plant health, ecosystem health, but also then it allows our dead fuels, our big logs, our twigs, our branches that are laying out there in the forest, and the grass that you weed eat, it allows it to stay moist. Mediterranean climate, surface is most likely going to dry out at some point in the year, but it would be less amount of the year, less duration of the year. It's also why we like to do a shaded fuel break, and we're not advocating necessarily like clear cutting even for a defensible space. That shade helps keep the water in the ground as well.
Thank you. And then Vesta had a question that we entertain on a regular basis. So I'll turn it to you, Marshall. Question is, watering roof surfaces during approaching fires, does it reduce water pressure and water sources?
Yeah, so to answer that question, I'll just briefly mention how houses catch fire. There's three main reasons, but pretty much two main reasons. It's from embers or it's from the exterior of the house being bombarded by heat. So you have a outbuilding or a vehicle or a cord of wood stacked by your house that catches fire. It's going to bombard your outside of your house for multiple minutes, probably hours, just like in a suburb area where one house catches fire, it bombards the neighboring house. And then embers, that's openings and vents, windows, decks, whatever an ember lands. In both these scenarios, if firefighters are there, we are going to be effective if you create a defensible space. So really what we're talking about is the scenario where there's not enough firefighters and you want to give yourself this extra advantage. Theoretically, sprinklers sound like a great idea, but I don't recommend them for a couple reasons. First off, depending on where you're at, you're on a water system that multiple residences use. So if you turn your sprinkler on, that takes then water away from your neighbor who may need water for whatever they're doing. But it also takes water away from firefighters because that same system is feeding our hydrants, feeding our standpipes. So my opinion there is that water is better used for the firefighters to use than turning on sprinklers. And then if you look at most roofs, hopefully no one has a wood shake roof, or you have a roof that if you live in a WUI area or a wildland potential area, it's either metal, comp, it's non-combustible. Those roofs, if they're of the right material and also assembled correctly, they can withstand embers landing on them. I think they're actually tested to withstand like a campfire for an hour. So if you clean your gutters, we advocate that. That's a law, PRC 4291, Chapter 13A. You clean where leaves accumulate on your roof. Really putting a sprinkler on your roof, it's just going to wet, your roof and it's going to run off into your gutter. Well, if your gutter is clean, you don't have to worry about those leaves catching fire. So maybe you're thinking, okay, the water's going to shoot on the vegetation that's adjacent to my house, my defensible space. True, but now we need to talk about when are you going to turn those sprinklers on? Are you going to turn them on 12 hours before the fire, 24 hours before the fire? Because if you turn them on as the fire comes, sometimes our fire hoses can't even stop that fire. So what's your sprinkler system going to do? And then, how do you activate it? Is the power on, power off? There's so many variables. Are you using PVC pipe that could melt? So that's why, I think maybe statistically the sprinklers are a good idea. I know there's vendors out there that sell good products, but I'm also giving you reasons why I'm not a big fan of them. There is situations where I have said, yeah, it's a good idea. It's a standalone water system. It's only going to affect that one property owner. Some of their design situation, they thought it out, remote activated, gravity fed. But overall, I don't think it's a good situation. I do want to touch on water systems real quick. I know it's been talked about in other scenarios. We as firefighters pretty much run out of water in every wildland urban interface fire. There is not a water system, private water system, public water system designed to supply the gallons of water we need to stop house to house fire spread, stop a wildfire. And then if you talk about houses burning and pipes leaking and everything else that comes along with the wildland urban interface fire, including the fires that have happened in Sonoma County, we do not have enough water. And I don't think anybody would want to or could fund a water system that would have, big diameter pipes that we could use. And even then it would be potentially, could fail during a firefight. So to sum it up, yeah, sprinklers can be useful in certain situations. I'm not a fan of them because I think the cons take away from the pros. And remember, we are going to run out of water during a wildland urban interface situation.
Perfect. Well, I don't see any other questions in the chat, and I don't see any hands up. We're past the 3 o'clock hour, so unless I see a hand pop up, we'll call it the end of this May speaker series, and we'll see everybody next month, Thursday, June 25th, 2 p.m. for our next presentation. And please, if there's any topics that you would like us to address in upcoming speaker series, please log on or contact us in our survey or our contact form on our website so we can make sure that the information is pertinent to what you're looking for. Again, thank you very much for coming out today. Chief Turbeville, thank you very much for the information and have a great afternoon.